SMS Kaiser is Germany's new top-tier battleship in Update 2.5 X-Way Strike, placed at Tier 5 and Battle Rating 6.0. It comes after SMS von der Tann, and is like a mix of it and SMS Helgoland from the other branch. For some historical context, SMS Kaiser is Germany's third class of dreadnought battleships, coming after Westfalen and Helgoland. The first ship of the class was commissioned in 1912, and 5 were built overall. 4 of the ships were present at the Battle of Jutland, and all 5 of the ships survived World War I. All 5 ships of the Kaiser class were scuttled at Scapa Flow in 1919. Kaiser has 10 12-inch 305mm Skl50 cannons split into 5 turrets. 1 is mounted at the front, 2 on the sides and midships, and then 2 superfiring at the rear. Similarly to the other German battleship cannons, these fire at 3 RPM and have identical dispersion to every other battleship. These turrets have a rotation rate of 3 degrees per second, which means that rotating one turret from its default position to a broadside angle on the other side of the ship takes a minute and a half. This makes Kaiser very slow to respond to changes in direction or swapping targets. The Skl50 Cannon gets 3 shell types: HE with a base fuse, SAP, and APC. The HE base fuse ammo is the default for fighting lighter targets, and against anything up to cruisers, it deals the most raw damage per shell. The SAP shell is completely obsoleted by the APC shell, having no advantages in either damage or penetration, and having no reason to be used or unlocked. Lastly, the APC shell is the best against battleships due to its penetration and filler, being able to hit and destroy most internal components or ammo racks. I would recommend bringing HEBF and APC, while completely ignoring the SAP shell. For secondary cannons, Kaiser has 14 150mm cannons which fire at 7 RPM and 12 88mm cannons which fire at 15 RPM. These do well against destroyers and smaller cruisers, but they start to fall off against larger cruisers and do little to no damage to battleships or battle cruisers. None of these are designed for anti-air combat, meaning Kaiser can't really shoot down anything other than very predictable torpedo bombers. Both weapons are under the auxiliary weapon set, so they can be directly controlled together by pressing Alt-2, making Kaiser quite dangerous against nearby destroyers. The 150mm cannons have HE, SAP, and APCBC. The HE shells are quite weak for their caliber, but are the best for destroyers and under. The SAP shells are completely obsoleted by the APCBC shells, and the APCBC shell is the best shell against cruisers. Up last for Kaiser's weapons comes 20 G6C torpedoes and various underwater torpedo tubes, which aren't really worth bringing. Their low speed, low range, and mediocre filler doesn't really make them a very good option. Kaiser shouldn't get into the range where these torpedoes can be effectively used, since that opens it up to much stronger torpedoes from its opponents. It also places tons of torpedoes within the ship for reloads, which function as internal ammo racks. Speaking of ammo racks, next up comes Kaiser's Survivability. It has 1,084 crew and at most 350mm of belt armor with coal bunkers placed behind it, along with a 50mm turtleback scheme behind that. However, none of this really matters, as the front and rear ammo is pretty exposed. It's very simple to one-shot Kaiser by hitting the magazine with any battleship that's capable of reaching it. Against cruisers that can't do that, or players who don't aim for the ammo, Kaiser is quite survivable, but similar to every other battleship in that case. Last is mobility, where Kaiser comes in at 43 km per hour at the most. It's pretty sluggish, but better than most battleships by a small margin, with the exception of the Yuga. For overall playstyle, Kaiser is a battleship. That's pretty much the only way to describe it. It plays like every other battleship and has the same strengths and weaknesses, with the only real standouts being its above average reload and how slow it is to change what direction it's engaging in. Kaiser is generally survivable unless you hit the right point where it instantly explodes. It has high per shell damage, but the dispersion and poor reload shared with other battleships make it more of a club than a scalpel. The mobility is better than many other battleships, but by such a small margin that it's barely noteworthy in most situations, and the lack of any anti-air weaponry makes revenge killing from strategic bombers an inevitability without screening ships. For if Kaiser is worth getting, it's pretty strong overall, better than what most countries get. If you already have Helgoland, Kaiser isn't really an upgrade. Kaiser seems to be more vulnerable overall and is extremely slow to respond to changes in direction, making Helgoland the better rounded ship. The question of if Kaiser is worth it really boils down to your opinion on battleship gameplay. If you like battleships, go for it. If you haven't played them yet but want to, it's not a bad ship to go for. For players like me who find War Thunder's battleships to be unfinished and boring, it's just another battleship with all the same gameplay problems as the rest. giving at most the cheap thrill of being overpowered against cruisers before the slowness and RNG of battleship combat set in. If you do decide to get it, for modification order I would recommend Toolset, Fire Protection System, 305mm PSGR L3.4, Rudder Replacement, Ventilation, Shrapnel Protection, Auxiliary Armament Targeting, Primary Armament Targeting, New Pumps, and Ammo Wetting. That modification order is a lot different from previous ones, but with the recent adjustments to fire damage, flooding speed, and ammo volatility, it needs to be a bit different. For crew skills, go for leadership, main caliber reload speed, crew interchangeability, fire prevention, and ship control. Thank you for watching.